All right, let's talk about the Tush push, which will be legal in 2025. So I figured let's make a video and talk about how possible is it to actually stop this play. It's kind of billed as the unstoppable play, but is that the case? So we're going to go through a good number of Tush pushes on this video and talk about why it's so effective, why it has been stopped in the past, and maybe what can NFL teams do to try and counter it. Let's get into it. So first things first, let's talk about, before we can talk about how you stop it, we have to talk about why is this such an effective play to begin with. And first, I think we have to talk about why the just traditional quarterback sneak in general is such a difficult play to defend. So like this play, for example, this is a tush push. You see how Cincinnati is going all out to see if they can stop the interior offensive line, right? Once Jalen Hurts takes a snap, he immediately realizes, hey, over to the left is empty. There's nothing there. There's a window that I can just squeeze through and gain the 1 yard we need to gain. This is something Tom Brady was amazing at over the course of his career. Hurts is going to read this. And as you see, while there was a push, honestly, it wasn't really necessary. He was going to get the first down either way right there. It's a difficult play to stop the quarterback sneak. It was already a very high hit rate play. The Eagles have simply just made it an even higher hit rate play with the pushing aspect. Because now let's go over here. So this is going to be another tush push scenario. So okay, if there's a little window that Hurts can get through, that's what he will try to do. However, right here, you see that the Browns essentially stopped the initial quarterback sneak part of this. If this was a traditional quarterback sneak, the Browns would have won this play and the Eagles would not have gotten the conversion. However, look at those two Philadelphia players. These are the pushers, the guys who are in charge of pushing Jalen Hurts, right? As you see, that's what they're able to do. They're able to drive Hurts forward just enough that Hurts picks up the first down right here. It's worth noting, Hurts is essentially doing nothing once it gets to this point. He reads the play, he has to try and get into the right gap, but then he just lets his teammates push him. You're in the air. Yes, he squats a lot. That's not a factor in this situation. It's all about the pushers. And that's essentially what makes it so difficult, is you take a very high percentage play already, and kind of the one counter is if you are able to spread out all your defensive linemen and clog up every gap, you should be good to at least, stop that type of play, but then they can essentially have multiple pushers as a battering ram, shove the quarterback through that gap, even if you have a guy there. So you have to have multiple guys there, which there's just no way you're going to be able to do that everywhere across the defensive line, making it what seems to be an unstoppable play, right? So, okay, how do you potentially stop it? It has not worked every single time. So the times that it hasn't worked, how has the defense been able to do it? Well, actually, the biggest way that it hasn't worked has just been a fumbled snap. Because of the fact they have to get the snap so quickly, sometimes that goes wrong, and that's been the biggest way that it's failed. But, of course, you can't control that as a defense. That's entirely up to the offense making a mistake. So, as a defense, how do you stop it? And the one team that I think when people talk about stopping the tush push, one team that usually gets brought up is Tampa Bay. So let's use some footage from Tampa Bay, who has actually stopped the tush push on multiple different occasions. So let's look at how, and this is really the most famous one. In the playoff game that Tampa Bay beat Philadelphia, there was a 2-point attempt where there was a penalty on the extra point, and so because of that, the Eagles said, well, let's line up at the 1, go with the tush push, try to make this a 5-point game. Just, hey, it's the first half, trying to gain some points right here. So, okay, what happened here? A lot of people said, well, it's Vita Vea, big Vita Vea in the middle. No, Vita Vea actually has basically no impact on this play. I've circled the two pushers. Watch them on this play. You're going to see that there's actually 3 pushers, but they're not really able to get there quickly enough, right? Hurts goes, and before they can get to Hurts, you have linebacker KJ Britt, who has jumped over the offensive line and is, he's grabbing Jalen Hurts' face mask, so this should have been a penalty and this shouldn't have counted, but ultimately, he is in position to essentially screw up the pushing aspect of this. You've turned it back into a traditional quarterback sneak, where the offense still has a high percentage chance of hitting, but at least it's a smaller percentage chance. Watch as the pushers aren't really able to ever grab onto Hurts, and because of that, the defensive line stands a chance, and they're able to win in this scenario and get the full stop. That is how they were able to make it work. And as I said, this was not the only time Tampa Bay stopped the tush push. They also stopped it earlier in the year over here. So this was in a regular season game prior to the playoff game of that season. And it's essentially going to be stopped in the same way. Again, Vita Vea, big fan of his game. He is not out there on the field. So this is not just they're strong enough to take on a tush push. You can't be strong enough to take on that play. It's not how it works. Watch as it's William Goldston, the defensive lineman, who essentially in both of these scenarios either is timing the snap count or is fully ready for the snap count to be when it is and just has great reaction time. My guess is in both of these scenarios, they timed the snap count. They knew when it was coming, so that way they could react the second the ball is snapped. But you see he's able to leap up, and here there's no penalty either. He just grabs onto the arms and shoulder area, so well done to not commit a penalty on top of this. And because of that, when the pushers try and push due to the disruption, you see now they can't do anything here. You can't continue to push. There's not really leverage for either of them at this point. Again, you've turned it back into a traditional quarterback sneak where the rest of the defensive line still has to do their job. But as you see, they are successfully able to do so, just barely. Hurts nearly got into the goal line. It is worth mentioning they lined up for the quarterback sneak the very next play and were successful. So, it's difficult. And in fact, Tampa Bay, kind of known for being the team that stands a chance against a tush push, is still just 2 for 8 at stopping it. They have a 25% stop rate, or the Eagles have a 75% hit rate when they run this play against them. So it's still, they're not, they're better than most. It's still a very high percentage play. Here's an example of one that got stopped. It's a 3rd down and 1 situation. You see that Tampa Bay is going to try something similar. Watch, they're going to go up and over. That's Levante David, the linebacker right here, trying to be the guy to go over. But just the issue is you really have to not just time this perfectly, but kind of aim perfectly. You have to really be able to disrupt the pushing. And here, essentially, Philadelphia just made the adjustment to say, let's just make sure we get into the pushing aspect a little bit quicker. And at that point, there really was nothing Tampa Bay could do. As you see, they did drive, back, and they were able to still get the conversion right here. Worth mentioning, this was after one of the failed conversions, but before the playoff failed conversion is one they hit on this one. Also heading over here, another issue that can arise when you try and do the time to snap count and jump over it is a very famous instance that happened just in the conference championship game this past year. You see Frankie Louvu kind of consistently kept jumping over the offensive line, much to the Eagles players' frustration, but you also kind of get it from Frankie Louvu's perspective as timing this play up, it really feels like the only way you can actually beat it, right? That seems like at least the easiest way you can beat it. The Jaguars are another team that has had some success stopping the tush push. They did it in a bit of a different way, where what's going to happen is at the line, they're going to try and go just as low as the Eagles are. You see right here, to be honest, this play still looks like it's about to be working, right? I mean, again, the whole thing is you have multiple pushers, and you essentially have a battering ram to get into the end zone. So even if things get tied up in front, you should still be okay. But one thing that's worth noting is I don't think the Eagles did a great job at actually pushing Hurts on this play. It feels like a lot of these failed ones, why they fail is the pushers themselves aren't able to get in position. A Jaguars player even is going to rush over and help with that. Watch, he kind of knocks the pusher out of the way. Ultimately, they're able to hold on to Hurts at the line. That was a stop. That was a straight up stop. So there are ways to stop it. It still just feels though like if the Eagles are, if the pushers get to what they need to be to quickly enough, that it's still just not going to be stopped. Also, I think it's very much worth noting, this was on a 2-point attempt, which the Eagles actually are worse on 2-point attempts when there's a penalty that allows them to get to the 1-yard line than they are on just straight up 4th down and 1 plays. And the reason is kind of obvious, right? Because usually for the Eagles, they can just hurry up and get into the tush-push situation. As a defense, you can't get the personnel you want out there. Here, the Jaguars were able to adjust to get the right personnel out there, which they might not have been able to do had it been just a regular 4th down and 1 situation. Ultimately, I think that probably is the best strategy. You can't just sit there and say we're going to muscle our way through the Eagles, because they get the opportunity of not just knowing when they're snapping the ball, but going through the gap that they want to go through. So because of that, they're going to just have more muscle than you are. You're not going to be able to just straight up overpower them. I have not seen an instance, going back and doing this research, where a team was able to overpower the Eagles, in the tush-push aspect. Usually it was because one of two things happened. Either the ball got fumbled or the pushing aspect got bungled, usually due to a defender getting in quickly enough to disrupt it, but every now and then due to just the pushers themselves kind of screwing up and not getting in position as quick as they needed to be. There was a small part of me that wondered, is it even worth lining up against the tush push if it's a goal line situation? Do you just let them score the points to make sure that you protect yourself? I still think it's worth lining up because the mistakes can still happen. They can still fumble a snap. You can still have a chance if you go up and over and try and time the snap count. And to me, I think that's what I would personally do if I was coaching a team, is that's how I would describe it. But yeah, ultimately, can you stop the play? Yeah, but you can also block a punt, right? It's just not very likely to happen. That's kind of how I view the tush push. It's something worth trying, but don't expect it to happen too frequently. There's also the other side of the coin, though, that I think is also worth bringing up, where a lot of people say, hey, if you think it's so easy, why don't you do it? But other teams do. I mean, one thing the Eagles are really smart at is they realize they have a borderline unstoppable play, and so they utilize it to their advantage, not just with every 4th and 1 doing it, but they don't just say, hey, it happens to be 4th and 1, let's run a tush push. They will, on a 3rd down and 4, sometimes run the ball, hoping to get the first down, but if you don't get it and are a yard short, well, then you still know you can get the first down, which also means that in the passing game, instead of having to just have a receiver run to the sticks, you can have them run a yard short of the sticks. Sometimes defenses will purposely give that up, and then the Eagles will just take advantage and run the tush push right after. So the Eagles run the tush push more than every other team, but they don't necessarily run it at a higher level on 4th down and 1s than other teams, if that makes sense. They have a higher percentage, they have a higher total number of tush pushes than everyone else. But the Buffalo Bills, for example, had a very similar hit rate to what the Philadelphia Eagles had on the tush push, and they did it a very similar amount of the time on 4th down and 1. Obviously, with them, kind of very notably, their misses happened to be in the biggest game of the year for them, the conference championship. So they actually were a little bit higher with a hit rate in the regular season, but then it all went wrong in the worst possible time. Well, let's talk about that. Why did that go wrong? So here is the infamous play, which I think should be mentioned. Many people thought this should have been a first down, to the point where there was like a is the league rigged conspiracy theory to happen around this play. But ultimately, it was close enough to be called short of a first down. What went wrong here? It's a very important 4th down and 1 in the conference championship game. The Bills are running the tush push. So watch the pusher, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize just how important the pusher is on this play. The Bills did it a little differently than Philadelphia. Philadelphia has 2 pushers. The Bills only have 1. But watch Singletary, quite frankly, just doesn't get into position to really help out Josh Allen too much. He's a little bit late in getting there. And at this point, is just only now starting to be able to generate some leverage. But even that, it's almost like he's hugging Allen more so than pushing him forward. There isn't much of a push here at all. And because of that, Allen can't do a lot because he's waiting to get pushed, but Singletary wasn't able to make the play work. And because of that, Kansas City got the stop. Credit to Kansas City, they were in position, but also I think you gotta look at that and say that, Singletary did not, the running back Singletary, the pusher in this play, he did not do a great job at really being able to make that play work. Other teams have ran this play as well, like, for example, the Baltimore Ravens, I think, did it in a way that I would actually say this is something we're going to see happen pretty frequently. Also, correction in real time, Devin Singletary used to wear 26 for the Bills. Now Ty Johnson is the player who was the pusher on the last play. So sorry about that. Sorry for Devin Singletary for getting a ricochet shot when he doesn't even play for the Bills anymore. My bad. But anyway, back to the play I'm talking about. This is the Baltimore Ravens, who also run a tush push. Again, I think it's worth mentioning, most teams on 4th down and 1 run a tush push at this point. This is a traditional play. The Eagles are known for it. Other teams do this. The Eagles just do it the most. What's interesting here, though, is that this is the exact same formation that you have the, that you have the Eagles running, but instead of Lamar Jackson taking the snap, it's Mark Andrews, a tight end, taking the snap. And essentially, the logic here is he's still big enough to be used as a battering ram, but ultimately, you don't have to have your quarterback taking needless hits. Watch here, it's executed well by Baltimore, and if it's executed well, it's just almost exclusively going to work. A Bills player even tried to go with the up and over strategy, but it's just so hard to pull that off, and usually when you do that, it also leaves you open to get pushed underneath. So it's just really difficult. You're essentially trying for a half-court shot when you do something like that. And so ultimately, listen, today, the tush push is legal. Will it be legal 5 years from now? I don't know. But if it is, I just think every team is going to be doing what Baltimore does, or, except for teams that still let their quarterback do it, right? I just think teams are going to realize the tush push. It's a play that works. It's a play that a lot of teams at this point, actually most teams at this point, have in their arsenal. It's a play that they run, and I think teams are going to eventually realize that, hey, let's just do things the way the Philadelphia Eagles do it, right? There's this idea that only the Eagles can pull this off because they have the right personnel, but they've changed most of their personnel. I mean, 2 out of the 3 interior offensive linemen are different, right? And they've still been able to pull this off. So that's just not true. That's clearly not true. The running backs have changed, which are the pushers in this situation. Jalen Hurts hasn't changed, and he has an important role in being able to see where the gap should be and all that stuff. So, and there have been offensive linemen who have stayed the same as well. So the whole personnel hasn't changed, but I don't really view it as it's a play only the Eagles can pull off. Because again, like the Bills had a very similar success rate. It's just that their losses were much more notable. Although I should mention, last year the Eagles did have a very high success rate, even among other teams. It's a little bit confusing actually, but essentially you look at the percentages. So the Eagles technically only had a 81.3% success rate, but that's highly misleading because out of the 9 times that they failed, 8 were followed by a successful tush push. So a lot of those might have been on 3rd down and 2 where they run it again and then are able to convert. So they essentially hit just about every single time, as did the Buffalo Bills prior to the conference championship game, as did the Baltimore Ravens with Mark Andrews. Most teams that run this play are very successful. And when you compare that to, your traditional 4th down and 1 success rate is 64%, and it drops to 60% at the goal line, even if it's not perfect, it's just a play that every team should be doing. Why doesn't every team do it? It's simply just a physicality. A lot of teams don't want to have their quarterback in a play like that, which is why I think a lot of teams will do the Ravens strategy of have Mark Andrews do it. Not every team will have Mark Andrews do it, but every team will have like a tight end or someone else do it. Maybe a backup quarterback comes in and does it. I could see that happening a frequent amount. I think that's just where this is going to go, which is ultimately why I think the NFL was kind of wanting to ban this, or at least people in the NFL was kind of wanting to ban this because, on a 4th down and 1, is this the most exciting play? Again, I'll let you be the judge, but ultimately, it's the play that works, and at this point, it's a legal play, and if you're focused on trying to stop the tush push, you're doing it wrong. You need to be focused on running it yourself and running it successfully as a team. That is the way that you counter the Eagles tush push, is be able to tush push correctly yourselves. Because even like the Bengals, who had a horrible offensive line last year, were very successful at the tush push because it's less about just the strength. If you have offensive linemen who are in position and you have 2 guys pushing your quarterback forward, NFL players are strong enough that even if they're worse NFL players, they're still going to be able to successfully do that. So it's all an execution thing. It's a technique thing. It's not the strength is what it is, which is why, again, the way that you counter the Eagles tush push is by having an equally good tush push of your own, and then both teams can be as good at it. At least that's how I see it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.